And that story shapes our conversation this morning with Mohamed Guleid, the CEO of FCDC. Thank you so much, sir. He is joining us virtually. Good morning, and thank you for making time for us on News Center.
Good morning from Naivasha.
Great, indeed. Now, the president declared the drought a national disaster, and 2 billion shillings have been channeled into fighting, or rather into mitigating this. Is this, a short-term or a long-term solution in your view?
I think this is a short-term solution. The issue of droughts in northern Kenya currently is going to cost far more than 2 billion shillings. And as you know already, we are losing so many livestock. People have started moving. You've heard of already conflict situation in Laikipia. Scores of people have already died. The drought normally does not just come with famine. It also comes with animal diseases. What we have now observed is that there's a rise in foot and mouth disease as a result of the, I think, shortage of water and the drought. So the ramifications are far much more, and it will have devastating effect, not only on the livelihoods, but on the security and the well-being of the people in the region. Mm-hmm. So what this calls for is that we need to, in the long run, look at much more long-term solutions. Reacting this knee-jerk reaction only when we are on the verge of the drought is, I think, not a good thing. It was already projected from June. The National Drought Management Authority had already indicated that there will be a depressed rainfall from September, October to December. Mm-hmm. So I think 2 billion shillings is welcome. We also want to thank the President for declaring this as an emergency, but I think more needs to be done than the 2 billion shillings. We want to also call upon our development partners, international organizations to step in also and support both the people and the government of Kenya to go through this difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Great. Mohamed, you are the CEO of FCDC, that is Frontier Counties Development Council, and the Emeritus Deputy Governor of Isiolo County, a region that is an ASAL region. What are you, we've been able to see that it's not the first time that this alert has been given. Is it that we turn a deaf ear, a blind eye to the alerts? Why don't we appear not to be harnessing this before it gets to, to a sad situation?
That's the sad situation, I know. The declaration of a national disaster is a prerogative of the national government and the president. So he's the only one who can issue such a declaration. County governments cannot do that. But in the meanwhile, let me also say that the counties have been doing what they could within their means. Even though their resources are not sufficient, they have undertaken efforts to mitigate this drought, particularly through water tracking and provision of relief food to some of the most affected people. As you have mentioned earlier on, close to 2 million people already are facing starvation, and that number is likely to rise. So the county governments, of course, cannot cope with such a magnitude of challenges. It only takes the efforts of the national government and our international partners to support us in this effort. So I think this first step, of course, is a welcome step, but it should not be the end. And as you said, you're right. We need to, in future, really avoid getting ourselves into this situation. And as I have already said earlier, the alerts have already been raised from June. Mm-hmm. So we should have already put mitigation measures in place at the national level to ensure that people don't start moving to other areas where there are potential also for causing conflict and violence. As we speak now, in most of the rangelands within the frontier counties, the pastures are depleted. There's no water, availability to both livestock and human. And naturally, in that situation, what pastoralist people do is to move to the next possible area where they can graze the animals. And unfortunately, this sometimes brings conflict because people sometimes encroach on private land, as we have seen in Laikipia, or even conflict with wildlife when they go and graze inside the national park and reserves. So we need a total national master plan on management and prevention of this kind of droughts.
No, yes, Mohammed, it is being, the current drought is being alluded to scanty rainfall during the October to December 2020 months and March to May 2021, which led to the prevailing drought conditions. But it appears that we sort of rely on, rainfall to sort of salvage the situation. Hence, when there is short rainfall, we are caught on the red. But when you look at countries like Israel, the weather patterns of the ASAL regions sort of mirror what we see in Israel, but that country has been able to even become food secure. What lessons then can we, take from such countries and implement right here in Kenya to avoid a recurring situation? Because in 2019, we even had the drought series right here on KTN News, where we focused on the ASAL regions which were affected. But 2 years later, we are still on these again. Then how do we even ensure that our people also perhaps even plant drought-resilient crops, are able to have enough pasture for their animals before the drought? I mean, what can we do?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Due to climate change, the frequency of drought has become more common. Previously, we used to get drought every 10 years, every 8 years, but now it has become more frequent. We experience drought and famine almost every 2 years, so it's almost predictable, as you have already said. And I agree with you. We need to do much more in terms of conservation of water, harnessing of the runaway, rainwater and the rivers that flood every year, killing people. And we donate a lot of water into the sea. I think where the challenge is, if I'm being honest, is that no much investment is being done in this area. Most of the people who are normally affected during this drought are the pastoralist communities. And unfortunately, when we look at the national investment in terms of cushioning against this kind of situations, very little money is allocated. So what we really want to plead for is an establishment of a national fund where the national government can always draw in case of emergencies, but also work on a mechanism to mitigate this kind of challenges in future. Right now, there's no national fund that can cushion us against this kind of a disaster. And the National Drought Management Authority is seriously underfunded on this kind of, with this kind of a situation. So there has to be a kind of a balance. When you look at the amount of investments under the Ministry of Agriculture in crop agriculture through various development authorities and boards, you will see there's a huge disparity with regards to investments in northern parts of Kenya. Right now, as you're aware, 4 of the largest rivers flow through northern parts of Kenya. And during the rainy season, they seriously flood and cause, destruction of life and property. So a lot of that water could be stored for this kind of a situation. But unfortunately, I think the investment in that area has been very much not well invested in. And it's time, I think, the national government, in conjunction with the county government, disaster response is a shared function. Both the counties under Schedule 4 of the Constitution and the national government have a responsibility. But I can also imagine the counties can only do so much. The amount of money they're getting out of the 15% shareable revenue is hardly enough to cater for all the needs that they have. So what we now need is a concerted effort that we come up with a plan, a kind of a master plan that can look at areas where normally floodings occur during the rainy season, and we can harness those water in such waters in a mega dam, as you suggested, so that we can irrigate our land both for pasture and agriculture, and also maybe diversification of livelihood from core pastoralism to maybe agro-pastoralism, so that people can have ways of also maybe planting climate resilient crops, and they can be able to store it during difficult times like this. But we need a serious plan on this.
Mohammed, you talk about water reserves and being able to harness this water, and projects such as the Galana Kulalu irrigation development projects were supposed to mitigate such reoccurrences of drought in that part of the country. And we also appear not to have enough food stores, or rather grain stores in our in our grain stores. We appear not to have enough stock to sustain the population in areas, or rather in circumstances where there are, projected drought due to decreased rainfall? Because this year we've seen 50% decline. Moving forward, by your perspective, what do we need to do? Because these projects are, have never been materialized, and we appear not to be having enough grain stock. Where do we then mitigate, even as we bring this conversation to a close, where do we then mitigate as a country and the government to just ensure that while we are, facing water shortage, we do have irrigation projects going on, and we also have enough grain storage?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, right now in Kenya, it's not that we are in food deficit situation. Other parts of the country are flooded with sufficient food because the rainfall failure is more in the northern part of Kenya. In the western part, they have received, I think, if I'm not wrong, adequate rainfall. Even as I was coming to Naivasha this morning, there was sufficient rain around this area. So I think where concerted effort needs to be put is in the northern part of Kenya. That's where we are facing challenges. And remember, this is a region that has been underserved for the last 60 years. No much meaningful investment has taken place in that region. This kind of infrastructure you are talking about should have been in place from the beginning, but they never really happened. And when you look at the total percentage of investment towards northern Kenya vis-a-vis the rest of the country, it's quite marginal. So this kind of disparities is also what is being evidenced through this kind of, drought, consequences of drought and famine and challenges around climate change. So I think what just needs to be done is to give a fair and equitable resource reallocation so that this region also can receive those a mega dam that can, I'll give you a good example. In Isiolo, where I come from, the governor had a plan to set up a dam called Fubikalo Dam along the Waso River. And that dam would have costed around 6 to 10 billion shillings. But due to lack of funds at the county, he was not able to do. But once such a dam is put in place, it's able to take care of challenges around that area, maybe even the neighboring counties. So this is just a matter of investment. It's nothing else. And I think we just need to do more advocacy. And at the FCDC, that is the role we have. We have been, even the disaster declaration you saw yesterday that the president did was mainly through the FCDC's advocacy and lobby. We had to tell him, Your Excellency, you need to declare this as a disaster, because in the absence of that, we could not even appeal to our international partners. So I think we need to really look at how more investments can come to northern Kenya, build roads, build schools, build hospitals, and water facilities so that people can also be educated. Right now, it's not just about drought. If you look at northern Kenya, the challenges are beyond drought. As we speak, in some sections of the northeastern part of Kenya, children are not going to school due to insecurity. And some areas, villages have completely moved away. And right now, there's a heightened state of alert and tension due to fears of violence as a result of the drought that has come. And the election being also in the corner is not really helping. So I am looking forward to quite some difficult few months ahead. Hopefully, and we pray that that it's going to rain in October. The forecast says there will be less rain, but sometimes the gods defy the meteorological, predictions. So, as I said, all we need is to really identify key areas where we can put mega dams, harness water, and ensure that there is enough investment in this region.
Indeed, equitable resource allocation, investment, advocacy, construction of major dams, all these because they say a stitch in time saves 9. That has been the parting shot by the CEO of FCDC, that is Mohamed Guleid, CEO of the Frontier Counties Development Council, FCDC, talking to us about that drought situation. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to us this morning.